I want breakfast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to You'll Probably Agree. Today we have Jeff York on from the Establishing Shot. And yeah, we wanted to talk about happy, good themes. And when we decided to lock down on a theme that uh, we thought was contemporary because, everything's going great in America, we locked on. I think you suggested it like a week ago. It was Falling Down. And yeah, that was a movie where I'm like, yeah, I remember when my dad had his video store, I'd always see like the cover to it, like on VHS tape, and I would see like bits and pieces of it. I think maybe when it was on cable where he played the tape. And yeah, I remember I watched it through a few years ago, and I just thought it was mediocre. And I watched it again straight through recently and thought it was mediocre. But Jeff, could you give us your thoughts on Falling Down, and if you think it is above mediocre or not?
Well, I think it's mediocre to very interesting to watch, even though I think a
Yeah.
lot of it is not particularly well done or maybe overdone. It's a 1993 movie that was done by Joel Schumacher, who either did interesting movies like this and Cousins, which were very well directed by and large. Cousins, I think, was a very underrated, almost forgotten romantic comedy, more of a romantic dramedy in a way from yesteryear. And this one, which was, kind of the counter to his foray into the world of Batman and sort of the frivolity of some of that kind of Hollywood commercialism, if you will.
Yeah.
But this one was an attempt to, I think, capture a mood that was coming on strong in America, where there was a sense of everything was changing very fast. The media and norms and, sort of broken families and overwhelming politics and differences in jobs and culture and stuff like that were getting a little bit overwhelming, particularly, I dare say, for the American male, who I think was finding more and more that he was having to share after how many years of basically being the whole pie.
Yeah.
There was more room for multicultural things, different kinds of minorities. Women were becoming stronger in the workforce, et cetera, et cetera. And, even women's roles and a lot of sort of what men's roles were started to get re-examined, I think, starting from the 70s on. But by the 90s, I think it hit a point where white men were feeling a lot of grievance about it. And it's funny because what makes this film, I think, an interesting topic for tonight is that I think it's only escalated since then. I think it's actually blown up into crazy proportions, as we saw with some of the stuff that was going on in the last few years with the politics and with the podcasts and the bro culture and sort of these white men sort of railing against the windmills, if you will. The windmills have changed that you can't really fight, and yet they're fighting and they're making a difference because they don't want to go down without a fight, and they're upset about the too much change in the world. And I think even a phrase like "Make America Great Again" is supposed to harken back to a time when roles were simpler, times were simpler. Men did this, women did that. I mean, if you hear Glenn Beck talking about it in the early part of this century, it was that kind of conversation. I think, some of the politicians and some of the people who have sort of established that, Joe Rogan, Charlie Kirk, other people on the right, have gotten into this, what happened to religion and morals and the typical sort of roles that people played. And I think it, unfortunately, gets too angry and, rubs up against danger and violence and putting down people and sort of hurting people the way this film does. So in many ways this film was sort of ahead of its time, I think, or at least maybe of its time, and it seems more interesting, as I said earlier, today, because I think you look at this and you can say a lot of it's overdone, a lot of it's too contrived or silly or a little broadly sketched, but it certainly is in the zeitgeist of culture more than ever today. And to have this done so many decades ago is kind of extraordinary. And here I think it's a film that is more interesting to look at than some films of the 90s that, that's so much of the time it doesn't seem particularly interesting or relevant today, where this film, I think, can be watched today and still be discussed rather thoroughly because so many of the issues it raises are right there in front of our faces today.
Yeah, I think the movie now, when I say it's mediocre, it's because as mediocre as you were kind of saying in an interesting way, and where it takes these really big swings
Yes.
and it gets some occasional hits, but there's like a lot of huge misses. And the thing is, Roger Ebert oddly defended it in his review, which I would never expect him to like it because the moment, and I have the clip from the scene here, and this is the only clip we have, but the moment Michael Douglas walks into the Korean stores, into the
Convenience store.
yeah, the convenience store run by the Korean owner.
Right.
Here's where I couldn't quite get on board with him.
Drink, 85 cents. You pay or go.
What's a phi? I don't understand a phi. There's a V in the word. It's five. You don't got V's in China?
Not Chinese. I'm Korean.
Whatever. You come to my country, you take my money, you don't even have the grace to learn how to speak my language. Aspirin. Price?
$3.40.
Oh, please.
Now that's just reprehensible because he's first off he's becoming he's overtly racist, telling him
Yes.
you don't even speak English in my country, and then he takes it a step further where he trashes the guy's entire business, and it was all over 50 cents for a soda, and he gets mad at the guy over that. Now he is sort of the byproduct of a generation of people where they came back from the Vietnam War, and maybe he has a resentment against people of Asian descent because he was taught to maybe shoot and kill all the Vietnamese out there. And I think he's kind of a product of where America teaches the wrong values and encodes racism into people, but it also does it by having cartoonish racist stereotypes play the characters. Like the Korean store owner is, $5, you'll get this right now. And then you get the guys who are mad because Michael Douglas or Defense is on their graffiti stop and that's their territory. So you have like stereotypes of Latinos in there. And then you get the one part that seemed a little kind of hypocritical where the neo-Nazi psycho guy wants to Michael Douglas thinks he's better than him, but it's like, but you're still kind of like him, maybe not as extreme, but you're there. But I feel like the movie kind of had some opportunities where it could have examined how Defense became this person or how he is like racist the way he is, because it seems like we're watching a person who feels like they're white and entitled, and although he is sort of like he's feeling the failure of the American dream because he literally works for the defense department, hence his licensed defense. It's he wants to take it out on the world rather than looking inwardly or getting any help, and that's how he becomes a psycho. And he's a psycho even before that, when his wife said she was afraid he would hurt her.
I agree. In fact, I think it's almost too easy to have him be sort of that lost and that much of a, dare I say, conceit more than a character. To have him be, he's angry at the government for firing him after, he's been on the job for so long. He's mad at coming home and not being treated as a hero. He's mad at all the minorities who he thinks are bilking the system or taking jobs away from him or threatening him. And, everywhere he turns, there's somebody who's a problem for him. And even when he ends up on the golf course, it's a rich 1%er in pink plaid pants, which is just absurd looking. I think this movie is saved by the actors that Schumacher at least cast in it, because Michael Douglas manages to make the character, even though he's kind of a cartoon character in many regards, I would say from almost the get-go. Barbara Hershey and Robert Duvall, some very good actors are in this. Even Frederick Forrest as the neo-Nazi who's running the shop at the end when he gets the bazooka and then changes into the military garb. That's a quality actor. And Schumacher had been working around as a costume designer or a production designer and stuff, costumer in that kind of world. So he'd seen a lot and knew how to put good people in roles. But I have to say, I think that the biggest problem with this movie right off the bat is that it is a representational script written by a guy named Eddie Rowe Smith that I think is already starts at a 7, if not an 8. and then goes maybe up to a 19 practically.
Yeah.
And here's the thing too, is it's funny. I don't want to jump ahead necessarily, but I think it's easy to look back at it, maybe knowing that at the end, when Michael Douglas is standing out on the pier and he's got the gun, and he's, got the showdown with Robert Duvall, he says, I've done all this and yet I'm the bad guy. I'm the bad guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's been the bad guy since minute one of this film, because he's mad that he's lost his job that day. Now, we don't know that just yet, but what we do know of him is all that we can is what we see. And we see him stuck in traffic. And grant you, it's in Los Angeles. And anybody who's ever been to Los Angeles knows that you spend a great deal of time in traffic. So it's not a surprise ever. And he decides to counter that by getting out of his car and walking away. Now, to me, I'm looking at it as a regular person, thinking like, well, if I was the car behind him, I would be stuck there as well as 200 other cars behind him because they can't get this car out of there. Where do you move it? And he's ruined the day for everybody and their brother. So to me, he's a bad guy right off the bat. Now, maybe not a bad guy worth getting shot at the end, which he's probably earned, but right off the bat, he's bad. And from there, he makes one sort of, easy dismissal of whoever is in front of him. And they happen to be very broadly drawn people. You said, the Korean owner of the store, who he says is Chinese because he doesn't know the difference between nationalities from the Southeast. He sits on a hill and, is accosted by a couple of Latino gang members. I mean, it's just a little too easy, all these big, broad things getting up. What I think would have been better in the script and better for a much more classic movie that I think would have even at the time stirred more debate and thought about it, is if it was subtler things. Like, for example, okay, he's lost his job and maybe he's, went out to have a drink after work with a friend because he was upset about it. And we pick him up coming back to his car and there's a ticket on the car. And he realizes that the parking meter, which they had then, of course, was 2 minutes over, but, somehow the cop already got him. That's happened to everybody out there who's ever had a car. And you always wonder, how does that happen? You never see cops around, but then I'm 2 or 3 minutes over and somehow, bam, I got a ticket. Okay, so there's a slight, but it's $150. And now he's got to pay that and he doesn't have a job. And, then these other things that could happen that would slowly but surely start to ratchet up. But when you're going up against, these cliches, as you said, where they speak bad English and, they're gang members and stuff like that, there's almost no subtlety in that, because I think, unfortunately, it's trying to almost make you feel like, hey, he may be angry, but he's the normal one, and he's not reacting to any of this in a normal way. I also don't like the fact that, he's a defense contractor. I think that makes him all the more symbolic. Like, he went to Vietnam and he came back and they spit on him, and then now he's working all of his life for defending the American dream, and then they can him because there are layoffs. Okay, I get that, but then he's called defense, and it just becomes too symbolic. But in the meantime, I think Michael Douglas is trying to give a good performance, even though they have him doing things like, bashing those bottles of aspirin in, or, losing his shit at the restaurant. Has he never
Whammy burger? Yeah.
Has he never been in a fast food joint? If they're still serving breakfast at 11, let me know where that is, because I've yet to run into that place. Breakfast generally stops at 10, unless it's a 24/7 place, or McDonald's for about 3 years tried to do breakfast around the clock. And then that was not cost effective for them. But, these things are all written a little bit broadly, and yet I think he acts kind of stupid all during them, because he could easily be offended and, be driven to a boiling point by things that are more understandable, less cartoonish, and I think pace themselves. But right off the bat, he's kind of off the deep end.
Yeah. And 2 points with that. One, of all the horrible things he said in that movie, I did agree with him on breakfast. I'm like Mr. Deeds when it comes to breakfast.
Yeah.
Or
like
not Mr. Deeds, Big Daddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and then 2 minutes over, they could have made an exception. Those sandwiches are still sitting there. They're going to either throw them out or give them to charity or something. They could have said, we got a couple sandwiches. In fact, why don't you take one? We'll give it to you half off or something.
That's what made me like the angriest. It's like, it's literally just right behind them. Just turn around and give it to them.
That would have been more realistic.
Yeah.
And, that could have been one where he got his way. And so, he's got a reprieve. but then something else happens. See, that's better screenwriting to constantly play with this. But it's like, well, what's going to happen here? Oh, he wants a breakfast sandwich, but breakfast stops being served at 11. Gee, I wonder where this scene is going to go.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder. And I think too much of it is everything he's painted as a loser.
Yeah.
He's got a bad marriage. He's not understanding how his relationship with his wife is affecting the kid, and she doesn't want him around. He's temperamental, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, this movie also pulls out all the other cliches. Of course, Robert Duvall is on his last day of work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, come on.
That was the part of the movie that really bored me and lost
just
me.
those
Because
kind of
every
things
time
are
they cut to
just-
Robert Duvall, I'm like, I don't care. And he's such a good cop that he never swears. Like, get
Right.
the F out of here.
But I
Really?
mean, the fact that that's what they need to do. How about he's just a good cop? He's just a
Yeah.
cop, and he thinks it's going to be a boring day, and then it turns to an extraordinarily trying day because of this flying ointment. But even when Michael Douglas is crossing across the golf course at the end, and the guys who are painted as almost dandies in their, I think, pink sweaters and plaid pants and stuff. Are they wrong to be yelling at him to get off the golf course? No. So at what point does this film realize that we've lost sort of our faith in Michael Douglas? I think we like him only because he's Michael Douglas. I also have to say, I think giving him the 1960s glasses, which were not really cool back then, or at least he's not wearing them in a retro cool way, or that crew cut, it's just trying way too hard to say, see, he's a man out of sync with modern times.
Yeah.
And poor guy. It's like, I think if he was really a father of a young child and a younger wife, and was living in Los Angeles, which is nothing if not a town filled with trends and young people and a vibe, then shame on him for he's not really a character that is grounded in reality there, because if you're in Los Angeles, you're going to certainly be a little bit more self-aware, or at least aware of your surroundings, than he seems to be.
Yeah.
And I just think, as much as he's traipsing all over LA and seems to know it pretty well and different things like that, he doesn't even know what prices are in a C-store. If you go into a C-store, you know exactly what you're getting. I mean, for years and decades even, it used to be a standard joke of almost every comedian to make fun of 7-Eleven because of their high costs and because you're paying for convenience. And guess what? We're paying for convenience again today. Oh, look, they've got a 2-for-1 special through DoorDash. But then by the time you add on the tip and the tax and the delivery thing, it's like, wait a minute, that's another $15? Yes, that's another $15.
Oh,
so
yeah.
you think you've saved, oh, wow, I got 2 breakfast sandwiches for $10, $15. But wait a minute, the bill is $32?
Yeah.
Where is this guy? He's in his 50s. He's been around for a while. He's the most naive 50-year-old they've ever put in a film.
This movie's like a very dark, depressing, sociopathic Curb Your Enthusiasm, where Michael Douglas is just constantly angry and he's ranting about little things that annoys us, kind of like how Larry David does. And then in the end, it doesn't work out for him. I could just imagine the ending of the movie where Robert Duvall shoots them and they just play bum 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 ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. Yeah, I might do
the
that.
funny thing though about your comparison, I love that comparison. Curb Your Enthusiasm works on, I think, 2 levels. I mean, and this is, I think we've talked about this in different shows before, but I'll share with your listeners if they might be interested. It might change the way they look at movies. But William Goldman, who wrote Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid and The Princess Bride, and adapted All the President's Men, and a big screenwriting guru in Hollywood, he said that there are kind of 2 things that are going on, lines of story, if you will, in any movie. There is the top line, the main story. What is the film about? Like, for example, Jaws is about, there's a shark that's come into the eastern seaboard waters and they want to get rid of it to salvage their 4th of July holiday, which the community needs. What's it also about, kind of the other level? It's about Chief Brody, getting his mojo back. He's emasculated from the moment he wakes up out of bed. His wife is correcting his imitation of the East Coast accent. And he gets on the ferry trying to close the beaches, and the townsfolk, or the town council and the mayor, talk him out of it. They even corner him at one point on that ferry, like he's, clearly against bigger, more powerful powers that be out there. And even, Hooper drives the boat, Chief. But at the end, when his glasses are knocked off and he's the last man standing or leaning against the pole, he's got his gun. And you remember, oh, that's right, he was a New York cop. He knows how to shoot a rifle. And suddenly you see that broken boxer's nose of his that suggests that Brody probably was a pretty tough kid growing up in the Bronx in New York. And his last line about "smile, you son of a bitch" is the only time I think he actually curses in the film.
Mm-hmm.
But this movie is about, I think, just a man going apeshit. Where Curb Your Enthusiasm is actually about those two things that Goldman talks about. It's a man who's finding all the grievances, just like Michael Douglas's character of William Foster before he becomes Defense. Is and that's relatable. We can all relate to some of those petty grievances, standing in line, misrepresented menus, people being selfish, people having to take a certain lane to get to a ball game, things like that. But then what Curb Your Enthusiasm is also about, Mike, is the fact that Larry David, because he's established as he's playing himself, the guy who created Seinfeld, and he's a rich man with no job, he doesn't have anything to do. He's got too much time on his hands. He's so elite and pampered and selfish and top of the food chain that the only thing left for him to do is bitch about the littlest things that may be a pebble in his shoe, but he has no other real worries. And that's what makes it funny, is he's such a kind of loser of a character when he's at the top of the food chain and he just can't let live, you know? But here, I think it becomes almost, what else is there to this? Not really much. It's just this guy is out of sync with the world, and everybody owes him a life.
Well, the biggest irony with Curb Your Enthusiasm is that Larry David basically earned his millions and his career by complaining about things and making a sitcom out of it. And then where that worked out for him his whole life, when we get to this show, it keeps not working out until you get to like season 4, where he does the producers and Mel Brooks thinks it's not going to work out for him. And then it works out for Larry, which, that show began to fall off a bit.
Well, but see, in that season, they went away from the fact that, he would not succeed at the producers.
Oh, but I love that episode.
The Max Back role is way too demanding. It's one of the most demanding roles in all of musical theater. Larry David would not be up for it. He wouldn't be up for the dancing, the singing, the sheer energy and sweat value. But to your point, I think they mixed their messages a little bit there, where like suddenly Larry was presented as a winner, when I think, what was funnier about it is even when he's got a good, successful restaurant, or even opens up a revenge coffee shop, he still is kind of his own worst enemy, because he gets in the way and shoots himself in the foot, metaphorically. But here, I think the thing that bothered me as the film went on and watching it again is there's very little reckoning or understanding of where he's at. If Michael Douglas's character, and Michael Douglas is a good enough actor that he could have pulled this off, and maybe there's a little bit of it there, though it's certainly not in the screenplay, to realize that he had gone too far and there was now no return. That he had maybe shot his wad, and that he was sort of marching into hell, if you will. That might have made it a little bit more sympathetic. But up until the end, he doesn't realize that putting on fatigues, that's not a good look when people are after you, hurting people and beating up on them, and now you're carrying bigger weaponry. This isn't a good look either. And, you're never going to get your kid to see you, and your wife's restraining order is not going to go away. And he just seems unaware. And if he had somehow figured out a little bit more of that along the way, it would have been better.
Yeah, I think in the movie's defense, I think it was meant to be cartoonish and darkly satirical. It's supposed to be like through his mindset, where everything is a joke, everyone's horrible, and to him, he's the hero. And it's kind of created this negative culture online, where people will look up clips, because like Falling Down, I remember that movie because like it would pop up on YouTube. It'd be like Falling Down breakfast scene. Everyone was like, yeah, I agree with that with breakfast. I'm like, yeah, but do you relate to this guy? Like, and that's the thing. You get people who know he's nuts, and the movie literally tells you he's the bad guy, and then he realizes it at the end. But although it is satirical and over the top, it's like a movie that would only work for the 90s because like if you made this today, you would have to like make it a very blatant point that this movie is painting stereotypes because that's the way defense sees it. But yeah, one huge issue I had with the movie was Robert Duvall's plot. It was boring. Like him and like, and I didn't get what was going on with his wife. They didn't really explore it. She was just very nervous when he wasn't around. And then, yeah, there could have been way more backstory with how Michael Douglas turned out to like, how did he start from being this person that his wife, played by Rachel yeah, I gotta pull up her name.
Barbara Hershey.
Barbara Hershey, yeah. Like, how did he go from this person she fell in love with and had a kid with to a complete psychopath?
Yeah, and see that's the problem is he starts off as a problem. He's already got the restraining order. He's already got the terrible marriage. Maybe he was fired from his defense contract job because he was unstable at work. Maybe he's a little bit of a nut there too. I think it would have been a much better movie, and that's where the casting of Michael Douglas helps it be better in many ways than it's written, because I think he is relatable. I think he is likable. He has never played a cartoonish character. Even when he played Liberace, he hardly did the mannerisms and the imitation that a lot of actors might have attempted. He made Liberace a very understandable, recognizable human being, even with all the glitz and glamour and the rings and the toupee and stuff. And of course, he won every award he ran the tables that season because it was such a terrific performance. Here, I think he's very good, but I don't think he ever plays it as cartoonish. I think the script is cartoonish, and some of the cliches and minorities around him are almost offensively cartoonish, but or are offensively cartoonish. But it hurts, I think, the film to have him already a problem. If his wife is already, got a restraining order, and so he's got a big problem that he's run into the law, and now he cracks. I think it would have been much more interesting to see how it could have escalated, and maybe he doesn't get killed at the end if you start from 3 and go to 10, rather than starting at 7 and go to 15.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of a product of the 90s. Movies like from the 80s and then going to the 90s were very over the top and hitting you over the head.
A little bigger, a little broader, as even shows on TV were kind of broad then, whether it's the soap operas, the nighttime soap operas, or the action shows and some of those kind of things.
Yeah, which had their nostalgic values and they're fun, but if you try to make something like that today, it would be too consciously aware of what it's doing rather than actually being genuine. Because that's the thing that works about these older movies, although I don't think this one works quite so well, but it's still really watchable, is that, like, once you skip Robert Duvall scenes, is that you have a movie that's so blatant, over the top, and offensive, but yet it's not trying to be like, it is trying to be offensive, but at the same time, it's not trying to be. It's just trying to show you what the world is like through someone's mind who's either always lost it or has just completely lost it. And I appreciate the big swings it takes, but it just feels like it's too simple, too broad of strokes. And when you go for something that easy and that blatant, it's like, yeah, it's a movie you can remember for moments, but like the overall story and what it meant, no, I mean, we know what it meant. It was about the American who didn't fulfill the dream they thought they were going to, or it's about people who were neglected by their own country. And it goes after all these big themes, but it does it in the stupidest way possible almost. And I mean, that, in a way, I can kind of see how Joel Schumacher made Batman the way he did. He goes for very
he paints with a broad brush.
Yeah.
And he does that here by and large too. But then again, I think that screenplay is writing with a broad brush too. For example, if he wanted to go into the convenience store and complain about the prices, and the prices are ridiculous, and maybe the idea of the script is that we've all settled for it and it's not acceptable. You could do the same thing with groceries today. It's like what you get for $100 worth of groceries is ludicrous versus what $100 of groceries would get a family of 4 even 10, 15 years ago. But in this one, did the convenience store owner have to be, Korean? So he's not only bilking us with these prices, but, Michael Douglas, the opportunity to show that he's got a Asian sort of hatred and can't tell the difference between somebody from one country and another in that part of the Pacific Rim. It just adds insult to the injury, I think, of the material, and takes him into Archie Bunker territory, which I don't think that was arguably the point of the film. I think the point of the film is that, for a lot of men and a lot of Americans and a lot of people, maybe male or female, the American sort of experiment or dream was more and more out of somebody's grasp because of changes over the last 30, 40 years of culture, whether it's, we went from a sort of an industry that made things like cars and manufacturing and stuff like that into a communications or a service industry, which and then the tech boom, which happened starting in the 90s as well. And a lot of people who used to have well-paying factory jobs were replaced on the line as auto manufacturers by machines. So those kind of things could have been part of this story, and I think been recognizable to all kinds of audiences without ever having to go into any dismissal of somebody who's come to this country and they're not looking like me, so I'm going to hate them. It's too easy, and it's too much gilding the lily.
Yeah.
And I think this film does want our sympathies. I think that's why they cast Michael Douglas. He's a very likable person. It's the reason that he was cast in all those roles, from Basic Instinct to Disclosure to even Wall Street, where he's playing these kind of terribly flawed people. A cop with a cocaine habit who's trigger happy, and blurs the line between suspects and people who are bed partners, and yet Michael Douglas makes him a sympathetic lead in Basic Instinct because Michael Douglas is a very good actor. Same with the other movies that he's done where he managed to make a non-likable character or a questionable character almost heroic in his fight for goodness. And then I think that's what showed up in The American President a few years later when, without changing his voice, and yes, he changed his haircut, but it's still Michael Douglas, but he's very good as Andy Shepherd, the president, and certainly believable as a sort of a moral warrior. But here, despite him giving a lot of nuance what he can to how he approaches the material, there's very little you can do when you have to make fun of somebody because they're Asian and they've come to this country and you don't give a shit enough about them to even care whether they're Korean or Chinese. That's just unplayable writing as far as I'm concerned, unless you're going for a satire on bigots like All in the Family was.
Yeah, or at least if they examine his past and see, like, if they tied it to Nam or something like that, and he saw them all that way, and you put like just a line of dialogue like that in the story, just like when I was in Nam, and then you get it. But
Yeah.
like they don't really do that. They kind of miss like the screenplay feels like it just kind of went through like 2 drafts, and then they didn't really like kind of examine, hey, wait, are we saying the right thing here? Are we, because and then look, I like how bold it is, and I do kind of like how stylish it is, but I just think that it's foolishly written. And yeah, the thing is, it kind of it presents a bad stereotype and a bad thing for people to look up to, because the wrong people see this film and they're like, hey, defense has a point, and don't we have enough angry white murderers in this country who go on mass shootings? And luckily, like, I mean, the thing is, defense, he's not a mass shooter or anything like that, but he resembles that.
It seems like he might be that if they did it today. That would be
Yeah.
the logical place to take the character. But, I'll go back to a couple episodes before when you and I talked about Frenzy and the fact that that movie deals with parallels, as a lot of times Hitchcock movies do, or even crime dramas. I mean, you can look at Heat, the parallels there between the Pacino character as the cop and the De Niro character as the thief. And they're similar kinds of personality traits and codes and loner sort of codes and stubbornness, et cetera, et cetera. Here, I think Duvall's character is there to create, here's a stalwart American man who's dealing with some problems, including issues at home with his wife. He doesn't have the greatest marriage either. He's, a little afraid to communicate with her some of his feelings about stuff. And yet he's working it out. Okay, that's fine. That's a nice sort of B thought, but it should have been made more relevant to what's going on here. For example, if they had shown that Michael Douglas wasn't terrible with Barbara Hershey and his kid that didn't already have the restraining order because he'd been so god awful as a husband and a dangerous, violent father. There's no place to go with it except that, everything he's doing is reiterating why there's a sanction against him. They needed to show, I think, okay, here are two working class Joes who are probably in the same boat in many respects, that they're never going to make a big pension. They're never going to get what they thought they were deserving. Maybe they can't afford a new car because their parents could, but they can't because it's a different world we live in now. And those days are long gone. And you know, maybe his bank account isn't what it should be, or because groceries are too high, or C-store milk is, or soup or whatever is too expensive. And yet one person's dealing with it by waiting to get him all the more worked up. And the other person is dealing with it like, hey, I can't control that, but I can control this. And I can be in control of my emotions and my faculties during my job and do my job effectively and be a productive society member. But I think this film kind of miffs that, or whiffs that, if you will, because I don't think that ever really becomes all that apparent. I think Duvall is there to give us a strong male character versus this other male character who's falling down. And of course, eventually they're going to meet. But to your point, I think they give Robert Duvall's character a lot of stuff to do that doesn't have that much to do with what's going on here. And dare I say, it seems like filler. Getting back to the screenplay again, too, and I'm always very mad about this because I think whether you're writing an ad or a short story or a novel or a screenplay, you have to be aware of other stuff that's gone on before, and at various places attempt to do something that surprises people, because otherwise they're going to get ahead of the story. And that's my number one complaint I have as a film critic. When I sit down, it's like, this guy is not an experienced screenwriter because I'm ahead of his story. And sometimes that's just going to happen from genre sort of tropes, or maybe I've been around too long and this guy hasn't, but I'm ahead of the story most of the time. Okay, he's out on the hill and we see Hispanic gang members that come to him. So what's going to happen? Well, of course, they're going to be confrontational and it's going to become violent. Do something else. Have them not be the problem. Have it be some surfer dude or some skateboarder or two snotty entitled girls who walk by and think, you know, they're the hottest thing since sliced white bread, and they're the ones who give them the problem. Don't have it be like, okay, well, you know, we've got the Asian guy to piss him off, and then we've got the Latinos to piss him off, and then, you know, I think, and they think they're, well, we'll throw in the far right guy at the end, you know, with the neo-Nazi, the fascist. Even that's too broad. It's like, find more subtle ways to piss him off. Little things, like I said, if they started off with him getting that ticket, because everybody's gotten that ticket, and it's like, wow, that cop found me, and I wasn't more than 5 minutes over the thing, and yet there it is, boom, I'm out $150. That kind of smarter writing is what this writer should have challenged himself with, as opposed to, I'm going to write a story about a really angry white guy, and this is my dad, and this is how men are today, and I'm that way too, and I know so many people in LA don't like the multiculturalism of it, so I'm going to go after those people, and everybody's going to sit there and go, yeah, I know what you mean, I hate that. And like, you know, that's not right, and you come off almost like a bigot. And I don't think this movie is trying to be bigoted, but it ends up being very bigoted.
Yeah, because the whole funny thing is about the Nazi scene is that it felt like the screenwriter was going, oh, I have all these stereotypes, but here's the real bad guy. And it's like, no, you're still painting everyone in a horrible negative
As
light.
a cartoon character.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
If we have gang members, they must be violent. If we have a Korean C-store guy, he must have trouble with the English and not say his V's. You know, I mean, what a terrible petty thing! Like, you'd ever say that to somebody, and for you know, Foster to say that to him, it just makes him look terrible. And that's in the first 20 minutes of the movie. Where does it go from there? We have another hour and 10 minutes with this guy, and he doesn't get any better after that. And I think the only reason we give him any time of day or hope is because he's played by Michael Douglas. But nothing the way he's written gives me much hope for him, because he's completely lacking in self-awareness.
Yeah, Douglas gives him a certain amount of empathy that you can kind of like see on his face, like specifically when he goes, I'm the bad guy, and it all starts to dawn on him. Like, he plays that very well because he plays the role very sensitively. He doesn't play it like his dad who, puffed off his chest and spoke sternly.
Right.
Michael Douglas certainly played those roles as a sex addict and Basic Instinct and as a, money grabbing bastard in Wall Street. But, in this movie, he's sort of someone who thinks he's the victim, but yet he becomes the perpetrator. And it would have been more interesting, like you said, is like, what if he had a bad day where a collection of little bad things happen, but it doesn't feel like a comedy of errors? But then like halfway through, or the inciting incident should be something horrible happens, like his wife decides to leave him.
Well, or like, for example, going back to the fast food restaurant. I mean, as soon as that happened, I said, most fast food places stop serving breakfast at 10.
Yeah.
And if you go in 11, then you're naive because you haven't been in a McDonald's or a Wendy's or a Burger King or whatever. But I mean, here's a way, if I was talking to the screenwriter and, let's say I'm his teacher in a writing class and he says this scene to me and he gets mad about like, why can't you do this? It's like, okay, why doesn't he go in and it's 10:05 or 10:10. He says, I'd like a, happy, whatever the, breakfast meal is. Well, technically, sir, we did stop serving breakfast 10 minutes ago. Oh, shoot. I'm so sorry. Can you make an exception? And then they say, yes, for you, we'll make an exception. Or the question I would have posed to the screenwriter is, okay, you want some sort of conflict in here. How does it develop? He goes, well, he's mad that they don't serve breakfast after 11. What else you got? All right, that's your first idea. Bring me 10 more and let's decipher which of the 9 others maybe is better, or maybe we'll go with the one. For example, maybe he says, oh, okay, we'll give it to you. And they give it to him and it's cold. The sandwich is cold. And he goes, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you put it under the heat lamp for a second? And then maybe the teenager starts to give him some attitude like, look, man, I gave you the thing, or whatever. Or, maybe Michael Douglas's character Foster says, look, I'll give you $10 for a $5 sandwich. Can you do that for me? And then he gives it to him. And, there's not enough meat in it, or the egg is missing something or fell off. I don't know, whatever. And then something else escalates from there. That's a second one. What else can you do? Does he go in there and the guy says, oh, sure, we just put it away, but we'll bring it out for you. It's no big deal. And then maybe Foster says something smart alecky. And now the teenager's mad at him. And maybe he sees the teenager, complaining about it to his coworker, and the coworker spits in his coffee before giving it to him. I mean, just how do you escalate this beyond this man walks in and just, oh, well, breakfast stops at 11. Well, I'm going to have a raging hissy fit about it. It's so two-dimensional. It's shocking. And I think this writer, by wanting to tell a story about how these outrages can build, and maybe this is a long festering thing that people get mad about, and that's why they vote certain ways and side with people they shouldn't, who aren't in their best interest. But he's got to make it smarter for us. This just seems so, like you said, like it's maybe the second draft. Like I wrote this first draft, and then I went and cleaned up some dialogue, but it's still the same ideas. I've still got the 5 major things that get him pissed off, and 3 of them are dealing with crazy stereotyped minorities that most people would say, I don't know if you want to do that. But see, that's what I'm showing. It's like Archie Bunker, but this is Archie Bunker with a gun. It's like, let's try for something more sophisticated.
Yeah, and if they were going for something like that, then they need to make it more upfront that it's a comedy rather than trying to blend the line between drama and comedy. Because like when you put in Duvall's character, it becomes this boring police procedural, and all of a sudden the movie's like playing everything straight, and then it's like, well, go back to the bunker shit. I enjoyed that, and when they do, it's fine, but then it's like the movie doesn't know what it wants to be. It's imbalanced.
Here's another scene. Let's go to the golf course. So we see Michael Douglas trudging up the hill, and his whole thing is like, hey, I should be able to walk here. No, you shouldn't. It's not a public course. It's never been a public course and a public space, and you always have to be golfing to walk across a golf course, even if it's in the city or nearby your home or wherever else is. Find another reason for him to get in a fight with that guy. Does he go to, does he get hit by a ball, or a ball falls right in front of him because it goes over the fence where he's walking, and he goes over the fence to give the guy the ball, and the guy is mad about him. Hey, you can't come over here. He goes, hey, I'm trying to return your ball. Oh, well, thanks a lot. Then return my ball and get out of here. Okay, now you've given him a reason to be a little bit mad. He was trying to be a good person. Again, showing us the decent person that is still in William Foster. But instead, he's traipsing up I have every right to walk through this. And I'm watching it, wanting to like him, wanting to feel sorry for him, wanting to connect to the main character. And I keep saying, man, you're lucky they didn't take your head off with a 5-iron, because you're just being an asshole about everything. Show us that you're sympathetic. Show us how these things get to you. And it's not just rules, it's people, it's their pettiness, it's them being vicious, but we have to dress the guys in pink and plaid pants to make them all the more idiotic, when I don't think what they're arguing with him about in the core of the scene is wrong at all.
Yeah, he's very much like a male Karen role. He even asks for a manager at one point in the movie.
Yes, exactly. And we ridicule Karen today. Nobody, I mean, unless we're the Karen somehow in an incident, but most of us are not, of course. But nobody thinks that, oh, I understand that, Karen. She's had a tough go of it. She's trying to be a mom and a wife and a present member of society, and it's tough and all that. Nobody cares about that stuff. She's just being a terrible, terrible person, letting all of her grievances be worn on her sleeve, like her striped polo shirt and everything else.
Yeah, well, society has rules for a certain reason. You can be upset, but once you cross a certain line, I can't feel sorry for you anymore. If you're letting someone die of a heart attack just because he's richer than you, and he's like, I get it.
Right.
It's a fuck you against rich people, but who cares? And then he's arguing with the homeless guy who actually wasn't homeless. Well, he deserved that. But but then the whole whammy burger scene is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And especially like with the manager with like the David Letterman gap in his tooth. It's just like, why are we going this cartoony? Like, yes, sir, can I help you?
And why does everything have to be him confronting somebody? Some of this should just be the slow boil in him. For example, if he runs into a homeless person who's asking for money on them, if you've ever been on the 3rd Street Promenade in Westwood, it's hard to go down there and watch the entertainment or shop, because there is a homeless problem, and they're very forward. And it's scary, especially at night, for young people or women or anybody for that matter, but especially for them, because sometimes there's an aggressive quality. Okay, do that, but he then fights with them all the time. I don't think people are that prone to fighting and yelling and getting mad. He can be getting more and more mad, but part of the reason he would be getting more and more mad is he would be suppressing that rage. This is supposed to be about a man who is still suppressed or repressed even by many parts of his life, but certainly suppressing rage, because we aren't allowed to go crazy and bonkers at every turn in this. And even on the day when he's finally letting it out, you have to have ebb and flow. Everything he comes into just becomes this violent outburst. It's like, have him smell the homeless guy and he's bothering him, and he just doesn't want to deal with that. And then as he's walking, he can still smell it on his clothes, but he mumbles to himself, and it's just in his head. And then he goes to the next thing, and that perturbs him a little bit more too. And then it's building on the rage with the homeless guy's stench. I mean, there's subtle ways they could build this up and have us relate to this. And then this thing becomes about this, even though it's not about this. Instead, everything is so face value here, it's almost insulting.
Yeah. Well, it's like in the beginning, what they could have done with the traffic scene is maybe he has certain pills that he takes, but then he like reaches over his glove compartment and the pill bottle is empty. And then he like tries to order to get more, but the doctor's office is closed.
Or pull over to the side of the road. The road has a shoulder. He decides, I'm not going to sit here, and he pulls over his shoulder, and maybe some guy is yelling at him like, hey, you can't do that. That's against the law to go up on the shoulder. But then he parks his car, gets out, and goes up to the car, and he says, I'm parking it, asshole. Boom, and just bangs on his car without breaking a window or anything else, and just leaves his car there. Okay, I get it. He's had it. He's walking off. But instead, he parks the car in the middle of the thing and ruins the day for 300 other people. Right off the bat, I'm not feeling very sorry for him.
Yeah. right off the bat, he's just creating. Well, there was nowhere he could pull over his car. It was completely trapped
But I
forever.
mean,
Yeah,
change the scene then, so that's what
yeah,
he does.
yeah, yeah.
And then they
Exactly.
find the car, and that's how they connected to him, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they could still do the same plot points they had to get through in that. But, I'm also thinking, okay, so he trashes that car and blah, blah, blah. And then this, that, and the other thing. How's that going to help his wife and kid? You
Yeah.
still have to feel sorry for the kid because this is her dad, and he's connected to taking care of that child in some way, even if he doesn't like the wife. So, again, another reason to not like William Foster in this movie.
Yeah, the most examination we kind of get of his character is that he lives with his mother and she just kind of doesn't know what's going on in his life, maybe inadvertently enables him. Like that was the most we got with his character. But the majority of it is he'll go somewhere, he'll do some rant that the screenwriter thinks that the audience is going to get on board with and agree with. And in fairness, yeah, a lot of them these days do. But then you also have a lot of these moments that don't really connect but just feel like a series of events that
Yes.
eventually leads to a climax, but there's like no thorough way that it goes about it. It's just all
Mhm.
about crazy rant, boring cop, crazy rant. Oh, okay. Now Michael Douglas realizes he's going too far with the family. It tells him he's not a killer, or he's being nice to the little kid when he has the bazooka and he decides to blow up a construction site that could have killed a ton of people. But it's just so like predictable, the structure. It's like, okay, he's gonna yell about something that the audience is gonna be like, yeah, that's right. And then we're gonna cut to the cop who is supposed to be the middleman, and that's usually when I fall asleep. And then they cut back to Michael Douglas doing the thing again. And oh, how are we gonna end this? Oh, I know, like he gets closer to his wife in a cat and mouse kind of game, and then ends up, shooting himself, which he yeah, I mean, at least
It
he
would make an
deserved that.
interesting
Yeah.
like duality in a screenwriting course is to try to teach the slow burn.
Mhm.
And this is trying to do the slow burn where it escalates and escalates until finally, boom, the inevitability is that he ends up getting shot, even though he's just, get it? He's holding a water pistol. But,
Mhm.
you're trained to see anybody holding a gun and shoot. But you could do this in a way not to escalate because it escalates too fast. It starts out, like I said, almost at a 7 and goes up to 14 versus a 3 and goes up to 10. But contrast that to a movie, and I just thought of this, but 3 years later, the movie The Birdcage. Now,
Mhm.
it's a different genre, it's a comedy, but there is the slow burn build in the main character of Robin Williams
Yeah.
because he's trying to do this favor for his son to make sure that the conservative senator and his family is accepting of the son-in-law because he wants his son to be happy because he loves this young woman who's not like her parents, but he's trying to do whatever he can. But watch that movie, and it is a masterclass in screenwriting,
Mhm.
screen direction, and screen acting as we watch the character that Robin Williams plays get more frustrated and frazzled and nervous, and it's hilarious, and it's
Yeah.
just this wonderful build of 2 hours. Opportunity is like, keep it together. That's what this movie should have been like. And little things come out or little things don't come out, but it all starts to build. But instead, he's so cathartic in every scene. Why does he continue to get mad when, hey, didn't you just bash that whole C-store to smithereens? I think you can just relax for the next 20 minutes of your life.
Yeah.
No, I've got to get into another confrontation with all these other people. He's lucky he wasn't shot 20 minutes in the way people can be in California, especially with guns and stuff. I mean, it's just, but
Yeah.
that's an example of how not to do the sort of slow burn where something like The Birdcage was very, very wonderfully, because you're then relating to it as an audience, like,
Mhm.
geez, I hope they don't figure that out. Oh no, the
Yeah.
bulls have boys. Oh, and girls, don't your bulls have girls?
Mhm.
And Robin Williams is like slathering that soup in there as quickly as he can because he doesn't want them to see it. That's hilarious, but that's him reaching the breaking point. But he doesn't break. He comes close, but he doesn't break. This film needed more of that. All it is him breaking for
Mhm.
2 hours, and it's kind of monotonous.
Yeah, and the main thing that the birdcage is was it built up to that whole dinner. You know, the whole movie is
Yes.
leading to that
Yes.
event, and it's
Right.
like so. Think
That's
of
right.
the yeah. So then you think of like the falling down version of that. Like maybe we get to a certain climactic moment. You know, like 50 minutes into the movie, 40 minutes, where it's like now he's fallen down, and then we start to see the spiral rather than he's spiraling right away and going mad
Right.
because
Right.
then there's no tension or buildup. It's just
Right.
constant, raging. And it doesn't work because of that. You know, if you want someone that like, I don't know if you've ever seen it. I think it was called God Bless America, and it was
Hmm.
directed by Bobcat Goldthwait, and it starred
No, I didn't see
Bill
that.
Murray's brother in it. But it's about a guy who got tired of Americans being just jerks and doing things like recording you all the
Oh, is this the one where he
time.
shoots everybody?
Yeah,
He just
like they
shoots
actually had
everybody?
a yeah,
Yeah,
but they had like a
I've heard
build
of him.
up to it and like a falling
Yeah.
out. And this movie doesn't even have that. And it's like that movie could have looked at that movie for some good examples. But yeah, now I'd like to see the birdcage version of falling down. You know, what would the sequel be like? Oh no. But I think on that note, we will give our rating and then I think call it a night. So, out of how many
All right.
Guinnesses would you give it, Jeff?
I'll give it 2.
Okay, 2 Guinnesses out of 4. Yeah. I'd have to say, am I going to get a 2.5? Here's the thing. I'll give it 2.5 because it is unique, entertaining in that crazy 90s movie, blatant hit you over the head with the sledgehammer way, which, like,
Right.
there is an entertainment value in it. So,
Yeah.
again, before we take off, what would you like to plug, Jeff?
Well, you can follow me. I am write movie reviews and TV reviews as well at theestablishingshot.org. I'm on TikTok, Jeff York Chicago, where I do 1 minute movie reviews, just like Mike does TikTok movie reviews as well. And do you do yours in only a minute? Because I only do mine in a minute.
No, sometimes I ramble for 8 minutes.
Oh, do you really?
So,
Okay, well, good for you.
yeah,
I've thought I got to be a challenger because I'm trying to be very efficient and get in my
yeah.
caricature and all that. And then, as you may know, in fact, Mike always says Jeff York caricatures when he links me. But I'm Jeff York characters on Instagram and Facebook, as well as Jeff York Chicago on Instagram, as well as just Jeff York on Facebook as well. A couple of different places because I do caricatures and illustrations on the side. It's kind of a little bit of a different business. Though if I like a movie or a show, I will often accompany that review with an illustration of that. So that's sort of gives you a little clue if I like it before you've even read the review. But those are different places you can find me, and I hope you follow. And thanks for giving me that opportunity, Mike, as well as just being a guest here is raising my profile. So thank you very, very much for that.
It's always a pleasure having you on. And if you
Oh, you're
liked
very
what
kind.
you heard, go to ypareviews.com, or if you want to find me on TikTok, YPA Review Chicago, and anywhere else where you could imagine, like, social media, not TikTok, like Apple Podcasts, X, all that at YPA Reviews. All right, guys, until then, whenever that is, wherever that is, we will see you later. Did I just steal Ian's outro?